In this video, we're going to use the SERP Overview API within Ahrefs to do exactly what it sounds like and pass in a keyword to get the SERP for that keyword. And as you can see, the values that it can return are things like the number of backlinks, domain rating, referring domains, traffic, and traffic value. So I had the idea that we could average the performance of the top 10 results. So what we'll build is what you see here, a list of keywords, and we're going to get the average domain rating from page 1, the average traffic, referring domains, and traffic value. So that finished running, and as you can see, we can kind of get a sense for what is the competitive landscape of the SERP for each keyword in a new sheet templated with the various steps, because in step 1, we're going to pull in the SERP and the results to see like what are the domain ratings and make sure that the average is accurate. So we'll go to extensions and open up AppScript, and we're going to rename this function to get SERP, and that we'll write let sheet equal spreadsheet app, and we'll get the active sheet. Const last call, which will be a helpful get last column. Const range equals sheet.get active range .get values. Const row equals sheet .get selection .get current cell .get row. And what that does is basically when you highlight a keyword, this is the selection, the current cell. If you were to highlight and pull for multiple keywords, that would still be the cell, that's the current cell, and you are going to get the row. And this is just helpful because if you were to run for the future when you have more keywords, this would still work. Let URL column, I'll say URL call equal sheet.getRange, and this is where we're going to get the first row, the first column, only one row, and we'll go all the way to the last column to get the values. We're going to get the values that is returned as an array, and we'll say index of URL. And I'm just going to copy and paste these and update. Okay, so what these do is basically they have to match the values in this first row, which is usually the headings, so that you can tell which column to input data. And so you got to make sure that these values match what is in the sheet. We're going to get the date, and we're going to format it using utilities.formatDate. We're going to pass in a new date constructor. We're going to say GMT time zone, and Ahrefs in the documentation likes the full year dash full month dash day. We'll go back to the documentation just to show you what I mean here. And this is the first time actually in this API, the SERP overview, that they seem to, you can pass in the hour, minute, and second. So really updated SERPs here. We don't need that granularity at this point, so we don't need to do that. I'm going to say let format range equal an empty array, and we're going to write a for loop. Let I equal 0, I is less than range.length, I++, and we're going to push to that format range array, range, the ith value in the range, which is returned as an array. We're going to get the first value. We're going to cast it as a string, format it to lowercase, because this is how Ahrefs prefers the keywords to be input. And we're going to replace all spaces with plus signs. We're also going to say let API key equal a string, and we'll get that in a second, as well as const URL. Ahrefs provides a really handy keyword playground, or a playground for the API, and you can play around with this, putting in the fields from the response you want to get, the date. I'm going to get the top 10 results. I ran this test API call, and I got a 200 response. You'll notice that some values are returning null. And the reason for that I realized was that there's a type of result. So let's get that value as well. And we'll see that the values we want to get are organic. The ones that are null are typically a question or other non-organic results. That's just worth pointing out, and we're going to have a workaround for that. But this is where you can get the API key. I'm going to delete this API key after this video is live, but you can also get the URL that was constructed. And I'm going to take everything except the test keyword, and we're going to interpolate the date with backticks, $, curly brackets, date, close the curly brackets, close the interpolation of the string with backticks, and we're adding in that value dynamically. Similarly, here we're going to say format range, and we're going to get the 0th item. We're just going to get one keyword for now. We're also going to create an options object, and that options object will have a method of get and headers, which is another object that accepts application/JSON, application/XML. These are all provided here in this request, this curl command. I'm just formatting it so the app script can work with it. Authorization, we're going to pass in bearer with the API key, and I'm going to get the response from URL fetch app.fetch, passing in the URL and the options object. I call it num, and I use JSON parse to parse the response. We'll say SERP equals num.positions, which is back to the documentation, what this body is returning. Let's just log that out and make sure it's working. So get SERP is selected, make sure we're highlighting a keyword, hit Command R or just run, and we're getting values back. Okay, great. We're seeing the null values. So let's write something to get rid of those. We'll say const organic SERP is equal to SERP.filter. We'll pass in s.type.includes organic. So that filters only the ones that include organic. Let's log that out for testing. Okay, it's a much smaller response, which leads me to believe that we're getting only the values that we want that are organic. We'll say organic SERP.map. We'll take each item and the index of each of those. And we'll say if item.url is equal to null. Even though we just removed those, this is just a secondary check. Or if traffic is null, we'll just simply return. Else, we'll say sheet.getRange, the row that we're currently in, plus the index so we can iterate over those, and the URL call plus 1, and we'll set the value, interpolating again the item.url. Okay, so this is step 1. Let's Command S to save that. We'll go back here, make sure the keyword is highlighted, Command R to run that. Okay, we're getting undefined. If organic SERP.length is equal to 0, we'll say sheet.getRange, and we'll just put in the row URL call plus 1, set value, SERP not found. Sometimes Ahrefs doesn't have a response for those keywords, as you've probably seen in the tool itself. So we want to check to make sure that there's a response there, but the value is being returned. So I'm guessing something is wrong with how we're doing this. Let's log back out organic SERP. So I did not get the ref domains or the URL here. So let's add that in. So after type, we'll put in the formatting, ref domains and domain rating. Command S to save that, Command R to run it. Let's just log it out and make sure we're getting everything. And we are now, I believe, except the URL. So I forgot to add in the ref domains, domain rating, and URL from the API playground. So I just added those in with this %2c, which is a convention of Ahrefs API. Command S to save that. Pretty sure this will work now, so I'm just going to remove this code or uncomment it. I'll comment out the log, Command S to save that. Okay, the keyword's highlighted, Command R to run it. Okay, we're getting the top 10 traffic. What the heck? Got traffic? No, it's there. Got it here. Okay, traffic is now added. I'm just gonna remove this, run it again, check back. Okay, we're good. So now we could average. The average is 80.62 on domain rating. The average traffic is about 1,400 for this SERP, for best automation tools. So now we can average all that together. So let's make sure we have best automation tools, maybe front and center, so we can test it. But let's start writing that code. Function get SERP average. And we're just gonna copy a lot of the stuff that we just wrote, actually. Let's just do that. Good starting point. Starting here, we're gonna say for let j, we're gonna do another for loop. J is less than range, format range dot length, j plus plus, iterate over that. For each keyword, we're actually gonna get the organic SERP. So highlight all of that, click Option and up arrow to move all of that code around within AppScript code editor. So that's a helpful tool there. Instead of just format range, we're going to get the jth item in that range. And now we'll say const numeric fields is equal to an array of the values that we're going to get back. So we're actually going to modify the href URL in a second. So %2C, top keyword volume. I don't think we have keywords. And so those are all of the fields that we're gonna average. We're gonna create an empty object for the averages. And we'll say numeric fields for each field, const values equals organic SERP dot map for each of those items. We'll get the item and the field within that, and we'll say filter each of those values that are type of, or the value is equal to number, and the value does not equal null. If values.length is greater than 0, we'll create a sum. We'll reduce the accumulator and the value. We'll also say averages field equals sum.values.length. So that creates an average for each of the numeric fields we just created. Else averages field is equal to null. So if the organic SERP is equal to 0, we're not going to have a URL call this time. So we'll say dr call is equal to SERP not found. And we could even create more of those. If averages.value does not equal null, then we will input values. We're going to say row plus J, not capital J. We're going to do the same thing here. If you also hold down Option, you can select multiple rows or multiple lines and update at one time. And for these, we're going to use the averages.domain rating, and I'm actually going to put a math.round so that we have nice round numbers here. Do this again. Delete that. We don't need it from our other function. And now I'm also going to write an onOpen function that will take spreadsheet app getUI.create menu, and we'll call that menu SERP Overview. Add an item, get SERP, which we'll take in the function of get SERP, and we'll say get SERP average, which is the other function we wrote, and then we have to add it to UI. Command S to save that, and now when we go back to the sheet, if we refresh this, it'll close out AppScript, but you should see a menu created. Make sure the keyword is highlighted. Let's see if it works. It did not. Go back to extensions and AppScript so we can debug. Aha, that's why. As I mentioned, these values have to match exactly what column we're dropping the values into. And since I copied and pasted from step 1, they have changed. So those are now updated. Go back over here, get the SERP average, and it worked. And as you can see from our first test, the average is 80.62, and we're rounding it, so it's 81. The traffic is 1467, rounded. 1468, cast this as a currency, and that is the average. Hopefully this was helpful, getting a tool built using the SERP Overview API, using Ahrefs in my continued series diving into the Ahrefs API. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you give me feedback in the comment section below. Subscribe, do all the things, and feel free to submit any requests or any issues you run into. And thank you for your time, and thank you for your interest in automating away your repetitive tasks.